My, how quickly things change. Just a few months ago, Dillon Gabriel was being talked about as a real option in Cleveland's quarterback room. Now, after one press conference and a few subtle signals from the new coaching staff, the temperature has shifted fast. When the Browns coaches took the podium, they mentioned Shedeur Sanders, they mentioned Deshaun Watson. And yes, they mentioned Dillon too, but the order, the tone, the emphasis, it didn't go unnoticed. Then came the prediction markets, the odds updated, social media lit up, and suddenly Gabriel's path to QB1 looked a whole lot narrower. But here's the bigger question. Is Dillon really out of the race, or are fans reading between lines that weren't actually drawn? Because what's happening right now in Cleveland isn't just about one quarterback. It's about power shifts, media narratives, and whether the Browns are quietly entering a brand new era. Sometimes it's not what a coach says. It's how they say it. When the new Browns staff stepped to the podium, they were asked about the quarterback room. The response sounded balanced on the surface. They mentioned the pieces they're excited about. They brought up Shedeur and what he showed last year. They referenced Deshaun and what he's proven in the past. And yes, they included Dillon Gabriel in that list as well. But listen closely. Shedeur was tied to growth and visible production. Deshaun was connected to experience and history. Dillon, he was mentioned but briefly, no deep dive, no emphasis, just a passing acknowledgement. Now, that doesn't automatically mean anything. Coaches often speak carefully. Public comments rarely reveal depth chart decisions, and at this stage of the offseason, every quarterback is technically in the mix. But perception doesn't wait for confirmation. Fans immediately noticed the order, the phrasing, the subtle differences in tone. It felt to some like Shedeur and Deshaun were the main focus, with Dillon positioned more as part of the room rather than the future of it. Again, that's interpretation, not an official verdict. Still, when a new coaching staff arrives, their first public messaging sets the temperature. It signals where the evaluation starts, and this felt like a reset, not a continuation of last season's hierarchy. And here why that matters. When regimes change, so do loyalties. New coaches don't carry the same attachment to prior decisions. They evaluate with fresh eyes. That means draft status, previous reps, and old narratives don't necessarily hold the same weight. For Dillon Gabriel, that could mean opportunity. Or it could mean starting from scratch. What makes this moment fascinating isn't a single quote, it's the combination of quotes, tone, and timing. Because shortly after that press conference, something else happened. The betting markets moved. And when prediction odds start swinging, perception turns into momentum, even if the team hasn't made a single official announcement. Then came the numbers. Not from the Browns, not from the coaches, from the betting markets. Within hours of that press conference and a now viral photo of Coach Munkin alongside Shedeur, prediction odds for the Browns' 2026 starting quarterback began shifting, and social media noticed immediately. Shedeur Sanders jumped to around 44% to start. Deshaun Watson followed at roughly 35%. Dillon Gabriel sitting near 12%. Now let's be very clear. Betting odds are not depth charts. They reflect perception, public sentiment, market speculation. They move based on buzz, narrative, and sometimes even a single viral moment. They do not confirm organizational decisions. But they do influence conversation. And once fans saw those percentages, the tone online changed fast. Suddenly, the idea of Dillon as a serious frontrunner felt smaller. Was that fair? Maybe, maybe not. Because odds don't account for training camp reps, they don't measure locker room chemistry, they don't see how players perform once pads come on, they simply track where money and belief are flowing at a given moment. Still, perception becomes powerful when repeated enough. One photo, one press conference, one updated market, and now the narrative feels like it's tilting. There's also something psychological at play here. When a new staff publicly highlights certain players, even subtly, it signals confidence, and markets react to confidence. That's what happened here. But there's a deeper layer beneath the odds. Because this conversation isn't just about Shedeur rising or Dillon falling. It's about why Cleveland's quarterback debates always feel so volatile in the first place. And that's where G. Bush's argument enters the picture, not about names but about foundations. Because according to him, you can't even have an honest quarterback discussion in Cleveland unless you address one uncomfortable premise first. Here, where the conversation gets uncomfortable. According to G. Bush, you can't have a real quarterback debate in Cleveland unless you first address one core premise. What if the head coach was the actual problem? That's the foundation he laid out. For years, every quarterback discussion in this city has eventually circled back to the same point. It's the QB. Wins dip, blame the quarterback. Offense stalls, blame the quarterback. Development stagnates, blame the quarterback. But what if the structure around them wasn't working? Now, this isn't a confirmed internal indictment of Kevin Stefanski. There's no public document saying ownership believed he was the sole issue. But the fact remains, the organization made a change. And when a franchise moves on from a coach, it signals something deeper than just player performance. G. Bush's argument is this: if you refuse to even consider that coaching could have been the central issue, then every quarterback conversation becomes biased from the start. Because you'll automatically default to, the QB wasn't good enough. That's a powerful lens shift. It reframes last season, it reframes development decisions, it reframes opportunity. And here, why that matters for Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders. If Stefanski's system wasn't maximizing talent, whether you believe that or not, then any quarterback evaluation from that era becomes incomplete. Again, that's an interpretation, not a proven internal conclusion. But it explains why this reset feels different. New staff, new evaluation, clean slate. And when clean slates happen, past depth charts lose authority. G. Bush also touched on something else: the media dynamic. The idea that certain voices grew close to the prior regime, shaping narratives accordingly. That's a broader commentary on Cleveland's sports culture. Whether you agree with it or not, it highlights why quarterback debates here feel more emotional than analytical. So before we even argue about odds or favoritism, there's a bigger question. Are we evaluating quarterbacks or defending old narratives? Because if the foundation shifts, everything built on top of it shifts too. And that brings us to another example G. Bush used, one that had nothing to do with Cleveland directly, but everything to do with hype versus reality. To explain his point, G. Bush didn't even stay in Cleveland. He went national. He brought up Malik Willis. Remember the hype, the buzz, the idea that he was the next breakout name heading into free agency? Social media clips, arm strength highlights, untapped potential talk everywhere. And then Kurt Warner, an MVP quarterback, a Super Bowl champion, stepped in with tape. Warner said he went back and studied the film, took out screens, took out quick stick throws, took out scrambles. What was left? Around 28 meaningful dropbacks over 2 years that would determine his future value. 28. That's not narrative, that's evaluation. And that's the difference. Hype builds on moments, tape builds on consistency. G. Bush's argument wasn't that Malik Willis is terrible, it was that people fall in love with names without breaking down substance. They repeat buzz without context. They argue passionately without being able to explain why. And he challenged people: ask them what the player does well, ask them how many full games they've watched. Most can't answer beyond surface-level takes. That's a harsh reality in sports debate. Now bring that back to Cleveland. The quarterback conversation isn't just about Shedeur versus Dillon versus Deshaun. It's about evaluation versus emotion. Are we judging based on highlight moments, based on draft position, based on what someone on Twitter said, or are we breaking down real progression, real reads, real system fit? That's the deeper point. Because prediction markets move fast, social media shifts quicker, but coaches, if they're serious, don't operate on vibes. They operate on tape. So when the Browns' new staff talks about being excited about the pieces, that includes evaluation work we haven't seen. And that's why the Malik Willis example matters. It's a reminder that loud names don't equal long-term answers. Which brings us back to Dillon Gabriel. Is he truly out of the picture, or is this just another case of perception racing ahead of proof? Here's the reality no one wants to oversimplify. Dillon Gabriel hasn't been officially benched. He hasn't been cut. He hasn't been publicly ruled out. What he has experienced is a shift in momentum. And momentum in the NFL can feel like destiny, even when it is. The new coaching staff didn't dismiss him, they acknowledged what he showed last year. That matters, but the energy around the room feels different. It feels like the evaluation is starting fresh, not continuing a prior plan. And that's the key. Under the previous regime, Gabriel reportedly received opportunities that some fans believed others didn't. Whether you agree with that or not, that perception existed. Now with a new staff in place, prior allocation of reps doesn't automatically guarantee future ones. This isn't personal. It's structural. When coaching changes happen, depth charts reset, loyalty resets, preferences reset. And when reset happens, quarterbacks either rise quickly or get squeezed by competition. Right now, Shedeur carries visible momentum, Dillon carries veteran experience, Dillon sits in the middle capable but needing clear separation to change the narrative. That doesn't mean he can't. It means the margin just got thinner. And here's something else to consider. Competition sharpens evaluation. If Shedeur performs in camp, the narrative strengthens. If Dillon shows form, experience gains weight. If Dillon flashes consistently and decisively, everything shifts again. Nothing is permanent in March. But perception is powerful. Right now, fans feel like the tide is moving away from Gabriel. Betting markets reflect that sentiment. Social media amplifies it. Talk shows lean into it. Still, the only thing that truly eliminates a quarterback from contention is performance or lack of opportunity. And we haven't reached that stage yet. Which leads to the bigger Cleveland question. Why do quarterback debates here always feel like cultural battles instead of simple depth chart decisions? There's something about quarterback conversations in Cleveland that never stays calm. It never stays simple. In most cities, a QB competition is just that, competition. Stats, reps, preseason snaps. But in Cleveland, it turns into a referendum on leadership, coaching, media bias, ownership, draft philosophy, and sometimes even identity. That's not random. It's layered history. This franchise has cycled through quarterbacks for decades. Hype, hope, collapse, reset, repeat. Every new name carries the weight of the last 10. So when a press conference slightly shifts tone, it feels bigger than it probably is. When betting odds update, it feels like destiny instead of data. And when someone like G. Bush challenges the foundation of how the city debates quarterbacks, it strikes a nerve. Because underneath all of this is distrust. Distrust of coaching decisions. Distrust of media narratives. Distrust of whether the franchise truly knows what it's doing at the position. That's why every quarterback discussion here feels emotional. It's not just about Shedeur, it's not just about Dillon, it's about whether Cleveland is finally getting it right. And when new coaches arrive, fans want signs immediately, signals that this time is different. That's why the order of names in a press conference matters more than it should. That's why one photo with a trophy lights up prediction markets. That's why a 44% betting percentage feels like confirmation. But here's the truth. None of this decides anything. The locker room decides. The practice field decides. The tape decides. Cleveland's media culture may amplify every angle, but inside the building, the calculus is simpler. Who executes the system best? Still, understanding the emotional backdrop helps explain why this Dillon Gabriel moment feels dramatic. It's not just about him. It's about whether the Browns are turning a page and whether that page finally sticks. And that leads to the final question. Is this truly the beginning of a new quarterback era in Cleveland, or just another off-season storyline that fades once the ball is snapped? Here's the part nobody can answer yet. We're reacting to tone, to odds, to subtext, to momentum. But the NFL doesn't hand out starting jobs in March. Right now, it feels like Shedeur has the inside track, the energy around him is rising. The new staff highlighted him, the betting markets favor him, social media is leaning his direction. But feeling isn't fact. Because once training camp opens, all of this resets again, reps are charted, decisions are timed, chemistry is tested, and quarterbacks either separate or they don't. For Dillon Gabriel, this moment doesn't mean the door is closed. It means the margin for error just shrank. If he wants the job, he'll have to make it undeniable. He'll have to outperform the narrative, outperform the perception, outperform the odds. And that's not impossible. We've seen quarterbacks flip depth charts before, we've seen camp surprises, we've seen preseason momentum rewrite offseason assumptions. But here's the difference. This regime doesn't owe anyone anything. They didn't draft Dillon. They didn't draft Shedeur either, but they're evaluating without attachment to prior politics. That creates both opportunity and pressure. Because if Shedeur wins the job, people will say the signs were obvious. If Dillon reclaims it, they'll call it experience prevailing. If Dillon emerges, it becomes one of the more unexpected camp stories in recent memory. That's why this moment is fascinating. It's not a final decision. It's a directional signal. And signals matter. They shape expectation. They influence debate. They build narratives that players then have to either live up to or fight against. Right now, Cleveland feels like it's pivoting. Not officially, not definitively, but perceptually. And in the NFL, perception often runs ahead of reality. The real verdict won't come from press conferences, podcasts, or prediction markets. It'll come when the ball is snapped, the reads are made, and someone clearly separates. Until then, this isn't over. It's just getting started. There's one more layer people aren't talking about enough. When new coaches step in and subtly reframe a position group, it's not just evaluation, it's power. Power over narrative, power over opportunity, power over who gets the first-team reps when nobody's watching. Under the previous regime, certain quarterbacks got certain chances. That's normal. Every staff has preferences. Every system favors specific traits. But when that regime changes, so does the hierarchy. That's what this moment feels like. Not a dramatic benching. Not an official demotion. A shift. And shifts are dangerous for players who are floating in the middle. Shedeur appears to be gaining momentum. Dillon still carries resume weight. Dillon is now fighting from a less certain position. Again, none of this is confirmed depth chart movement. It's tone, it's optics, it's sequencing. But sequencing matters. When coaches say you don't take a job unless you're excited about the pieces, and then publicly highlight certain players first, that shapes perception. It tells the room who they see as central to the rebuild. Now let's be clear, the Browns haven't declared a starter, they haven't ruled anyone out, they haven't publicly reduced Dillon's standing. But momentum in football is like gravity. Once it starts pulling in one direction, it takes a strong performance to reverse it. And here's the wild part. Dillon Gabriel might actually benefit from this. Because nothing sharpens performance like doubt. Nothing fuels urgency like hearing your odds drop to 12%. If he responds with precision, leadership, and command in camp, this whole conversation flips. If he does, then the shift becomes official. Right now, Cleveland isn't announcing a new era. It's testing one. And the real power shift won't happen at a podium. It'll happen in August. When the reps are real. When the competition tightens. When someone takes control. That's when we'll know whether this was just off-season turbulence. Or the exact moment the Browns turn the page. And that's what makes this moment so compelling. Nothing has been officially decided, no starter has been named, no quarterback has been cut loose, but the energy has shifted, and in the NFL, energy often moves before announcements do. Dillon Gabriel isn't finished. But he's no longer protected by past opportunity. Shedeur Sanders hasn't won the job. But he's clearly gaining momentum. Deshaun Watson hasn't disappeared. But he's now part of a true evaluation, not just an assumption. This isn't about Twitter odds, it's not about one press conference, it's about a franchise quietly resetting its power structure and letting competition decide the rest. Cleveland doesn't need hype. It needs clarity. And clarity will come the only way it ever does in this league, on the grass. Until then, the narrative will keep shifting. But the final answer won't come from microphones. It'll come from performance.